says C-Y-T. Control your thoughts. Control your thoughts. And if you can control your thoughts, you can control everything else. Your thoughts are the guidance mechanism of your life. So control your thoughts. And when you control your thoughts determine your feelings. By the way, great question, which comes first, thoughts or feelings? And the answer is always thought. And I'll tell you why. It's because it is the thought that creates the feeling. It's how you think about something that is happening in your life that triggers the emotion. For example, you could get stuck in traffic, and one person could be frustrated and angry and pounding on the horn and waving at the other drivers with one finger. And the other person could be sitting quite calmly and planning their day and listening to a Brian Tracy educational CD. The critical thing is the way you think determines it. At the University of Pennsylvania, they did 22 years of study, and they came up with a concept called explanatory style. You've heard the NLP people talk about framing and reframing. Well, explanatory style says that the way you explain things to yourself largely determines your emotions, it largely determines your thoughts, your reactions, your responses, largely determines the total quality of your life, how you explain things to yourself. And so if you explain things in a positive and constructive way, then what happens is you respond positively and constructively, you feel differently, you take different actions, and you get different results. Now, the next law is the law of accident. And the law of accident is actually a metaphysical concept. The law of accident says that everything just happens by accident. It's not what you know, but who you know. It's you can't fight City Hall. The cards are stacked against you. We have in our society an enormous number of people who are led to believe that they are victims, that there's nothing they can do about their situation. And you read all this stuff in the paper all the time by, unfortunately, ill-informed people who say, you know, there's great powers out there that are holding down the working person and so on. This is all nonsense. It's all sort of fantastical things like believing in life on the other side of the moon. But nonetheless, they convince themselves of that, and they feel that there's nothing you can do. The greatest enemy of human success is passivity, is people feel passive, feel helpless. It's called in psychology learned helplessness. They feel helpless. They feel there's nothing I can do. My debts are too high. The economy is too bad. Life is terrible. I was at a meeting with a bunch of people for 3 days on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. This room was full of people, almost all entrepreneurs, and some of these people are having the best years of their lives. Some of these people are generating embarrassing amounts of income. They're successful, and they're all hustlers. They're all working day and night. And they're there, it's a mind-storming, brainstorming, to share ideas on different ways to create and sell more products and services and so on. They're totally proactive. And there's no negativity in the room at all. I mean, everybody is just sparkling because they're all bouncing off each other in terms of actions that you can take. Whereas the great majority of people have this learned helplessness. There's nothing I can do. My hands are tied. I mean, look at the situation. Nobody's got any money. The economy is bad. This wah, 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 wah. And so the law of accident, as you see, is completely opposed to the law of control. We say failing to plan is planning to fail. Failing to plan is planning to fail. So if you don't have a very clear, specific, written plan with goals and actions and priorities that you're working on every day, well, then your life will just drift around in a circle. You know, they say a ship without a rudder will just drift completely, but a ship with a rudder and a compass will go straight and true to its destination through any type of sea. And once we have a very clear rudder and compass, which we will have tomorrow, then suddenly we start to make incredible progress at a faster rate than you can imagine. So, number 3, the law of cause and effect. Now, this was the granddaddy law that really changed my life. The law of cause and effect says that for every effect in your life, there's a specific cause. Now, this law is completely opposed to the law of accident and completely consistent with the law of control. It means that everything that happens to us for a reason. Even if we don't know the reason, it happens to us for a reason. We say that success is not an accident. Failure is not an accident. They all have specific causes. And here's the great rule. If you want to double your income or anything else, what you do is you realize that everybody who is earning twice as much as you today was at one time earning half as much as you. It's the way it works. Nobody was born earning twice as much. They started off at the bottom at a very low wage job. So then they did certain things differently from you, and now they're earning twice as much or 5 times as much or 10 times as much. Well, then what we do is go back and find out what they did, and we do the same thing. And we say success leaves tracks. Is if you find out what other successful people did, and you do the same thing, you'll eventually get the same results that they do. And if you don't, you won't. And here's the most amazing thing with regard to these laws. These are mental laws. A physical law you can see, like gravity. You can drop something and you can see. You can see the results of a physical law. Mental laws, you can only see the results over time. But physical laws are just as fixed as mental laws. And mental laws work 100% of the time. And what that means is that, it's interesting, they say that in all of human history, man has never invented a law. You know, we talk about all the laws of physics and mathematics and mechanics and velocity and the laws of Einstein and so on. Nobody's ever invented a law. We've only discovered the laws that already existed. Now, whatever your spiritual beliefs are, I remember listening to Billy Graham on a talk. I was driving through the Central Valley near Fresno many, many years ago, and it was on the radio. It was late at night. It's the only thing to listen to. And here's Billy Graham talking about all the laws that hold the universe in place. He says, if you have all of these laws, then there must have been a lawgiver. These laws could not have just happened spontaneously out of the primordial muck going back 1 billion years after the Big Bang. If you have all of these laws that really explain everything that happens, even laws of mathematics that take 100 years for a person to fully understand, that explains with absolutely unpredictable accuracy a mathematical formula. Where do these laws come from? Anyway, my point is that these laws are neutral. They work for you or they work against you. And so we say that nature is neutral. Nature is like justice. Nature is blind. Nature doesn't say you'll be a big success and your life is going to suck and you're going to be in between. Nature doesn't care. Now, this was a great breakthrough for me. Nature doesn't care. Nature says that if you do what other successful people do, you get the same result. And if you don't, you don't. And nature's not involved in it. Nature just says, here's the laws, here's the playing field, here's the rules of the game. If you play the game well, you have a great life. And if you don't, you don't. But there's nothing out there that is determining what happens to us. It's all in here. And these mental laws are important. I remember I was in Istanbul some years ago, and there was a story in the papers in Istanbul. I was traveling at the time, and it was about a young American student who had gone to Istanbul as a tourist. He was traveling with some other people, and one day they were sitting in one of the cafes, and there's a whole bunch of people marching with posters and chanting in Turkish, and they're marching down to the main square. Well, he says, hey, I know marches. We do marches on the campus. We do demonstrations. I know all about this. Hey, let's go get a piece of this. And they said, no, we don't know what they're doing. His friend said, we don't know what they're marching for. It doesn't matter. It's just a demonstration. So he went out there, typical American student. He said, yay, yay. He's trying to imitate the Turks, and they gave him a poster. And so he's going, yay, yay, and everybody's saying, yeah, and they're all slapping him on the back. He's going, this poster. And they march into the square, and the square was immediately surrounded by police. And all of these people were arrested. And what he didn't realize is they were advocating the downfall of the government. And in Turkey, it is a capital offense to advocate the downfall of the government. He was arrested. He was brought up in front of a military tribunal within 2 days, tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. And sentenced to be carried out in 2 more days. And by this time, his friends, who followed along at a distance, they'd gone to the embassy, they'd gone to the consulate, they ran it around in circles, and they did everything possible. And Turkey happens to have a colorful attitude toward money. So they managed to buy him out of prison. His parents had to sell their home back in the United States. Cost him $250,000 to get him out. And he was saved and speared across the border a few hours before he was going to be executed. And I remember that story because it was a true story. True stories are good. Here's the point. He didn't know the law. And in not knowing the law, there's no excuse for it. They don't care. He said, well, I'm a stranger, I'm a foreigner here, I didn't know that it was a capital offense. Excuse me. He said, they don't care. You violated the law, you can execute it. And in life, we violate a lot of laws. We violate a lot of natural laws, especially mental laws. And when we violate those laws, we suffer the consequences of it, whether we knew about the laws or not. If you step off a 10-story building in downtown San Diego, you're going to go splat on the sidewalk. And it doesn't matter whether you knew about the law of gravity, or whether you approved of the law of gravity, or whether anybody had explained the law of gravity to you. The law of gravity is going to work on you, and you're going to go splat on the sidewalk. The law is neutral. The law doesn't care. You know, thou shalt go splat, and thou shalt rise up, and thou shalt go half splat. No. In other words, the law is there. So all successful people do what we call a harmonic convergence. Have you heard of a harmonic convergence? They had this, I think, back in the 80s or 90s, where you have all the planets line up. They all line up at one particular time in the constellation. This happens every, I don't know how many years. And so all the planets are in line. You know, the Mercury and the Saturn and the Earth and or Mars and then Earth and all these, and they all line up. And the magnetic power of all of these is supposed to bring about enormous changes, none of which happen. But it seems like a great idea. Our life, though, is to get our life in harmony with the great mental laws. And when you do that, things start to happen for you at an incredibly rapid rate. And you'll see, before this seminar is over, I can promise you, you will have experienced profound changes in your life. It happens all the time because you now have a harmonic convergence. You're now organizing your life and your thinking in harmony with these great laws. And they all start to work for you. So we say, okay, the B, it is the iron law of the universe. All other laws in the universe, I call it the umbrella law, all other laws, mathematics, physics, mechanics, all fall under the law of cause and effect. Aristotle proposed this in 350 BC, and it was called the Aristotelian principle of causality, which was a great shock to a world that believed in gods and coincidences and lightning strikes and Mount Zeus on Mount Olympus. What they said was, no, everything happens for a reason. And if we're not happy with what's happening, we can change the causes. If a person's overweight, people say, well, I'm overweight because of my glands. Yes, sir, it's your mouth gland, and it's malfunctioning several times a day. You know, we know how to be healthy and fit and how to live a long time. We know how to make all the money that we want because there are hundreds of thousands of millions of people who have. Did you read the statistics in the paper this morning? Great statistics. Ta-da! In 2001, there were 7.7 millionaires in America. I'm sorry, 2001. 2011, 10 years later, after all the depression, recession, panics, crashes, and everything else, there's 10.2 million Americans with a net worth in excess of $1 million. Now, that would suggest that all these people, 90% of them started off with nothing, and they're still continuing to grow. That's a growth of what, 2.8 million? Is that what it was? It's about 2.8 million more millionaires now than there were 10 years ago. And all those people started off with nothing. So if you want to be a millionaire, then you can be a millionaire. Just do what other people who started with nothing did to become a millionaire. You know, which is probably become very good at what you do, earn good money, and don't spend it all. All right. Sorry about that. You liked the first part, you didn't like the second part. So, see, the most important application of this law is that thoughts are causes and conditions are effects. Your thoughts are what are called the primum movum, the primary moving force of your life. Your thoughts create the conditions of your life. It's very much as though you had one of the old slide projectors, and you put in a slide, it projects on the screen. Your thoughts project on the screen of your life. As the hippies used to say, wherever you go, there you are. And so wherever you look, there you are. Wherever you look in the world around you, that is your thoughts projected onto the screen of your own life. Now, many people think, well, I don't like what I'm seeing on the screen of my life, so I'm going to beat up the projector, or I'm going to beat up the screen, cut up the screen. No, what you do is you start to change the picture you have in your mind. Interesting, we'll talk about this later, but all improvement in your outer life begins with an improvement in your mental pictures. Begins with an improvement in your mental pictures by constantly starting to see yourself and your world in more positive terms. So another mental law, the law of belief. Now this is a biggie. This is really the biggie. This is the foundation principle, by the way, of all religions and all philosophies and all success is the law of belief. It says that whatever you believe with feeling becomes your reality. Whatever you believe with feeling, with emotion, with intensity, it becomes your reality because you always act on the basis of your beliefs. And the more intensely you hold the belief, the more the belief becomes true for you. There's a gentleman that I used to know, his name was Glenn Bland, and he wrote a book called The Glenn Bland Method. And he talks about how when he was growing up, his father was a working man. And they talked around the family table. They talked about work at the lumber yard. And the father would always say, you know, when you grow up, you've got to get yourself a working job. You've got to get yourself a laboring job. He said the Blands have always been laborers. We've always worked by the sweat of our brow. And so the kids were all brought up to believe that they were supposed to get a laboring job when they got out. So he left high school, and he did quite well in high school. It was in sports and everything else, but his belief was when you entered into the world of work, you got a laboring job, so he did, on a construction crew working on the highways, digging ditches and you know, working on construction. And one day, he's been at this for about 2 or 3 years, and he's working away. He goes up there in the morning, sweats all day. The traffic is moving really slowly because it's a construction zone, and right next to him, while he's working away with a shovel, there's a guy, a friend of his from high school. And he's driving the car. He says, "Hi, Glenn, how you doing?" Through the window of the car. He says, "Oh, doing great." He's got his shovel here. And he says, "How's everything going?" "It's going fine." And he says, "How's everything going with you?" The guy's driving a brand new car. He's wearing a nice suit. He's well dressed. And this guy, you know, was no great flaming hell in high school, just an average guy. He said, "How you doing?" He said, "I got a great job." He said, "I'm selling, making really good money." He said, "Buying a new home next month and getting married at the end of the year." And he looked at him, and here's this guy, and he's living from paycheck to paycheck, sweating away. And he looked at that guy. He said, and it hit him like lightning. He had bought a bill of goods from his father. He said, this guy's no better, no smarter than he is, which happens to be the case. Yet he's got a different belief system, that you get out and you get a job and you get into business and you get into white-collar work. He threw down the shovel and he got up and he walked out of there and he said, "I'll never work with a shovel again." He went and got into sales. He turned out to have a natural ability for sales. Within 2 or 3 years, he was doing extremely well. Within 7 or 8, he was a millionaire, had a beautiful home, beautiful car. He said the turning point in his life was when he challenged that belief that he was meant to be a working man all his life. Many people have beliefs, and there's 2 sets of beliefs. There's conscious beliefs that we have, and there's unconscious beliefs. And there's that wonderful line from Josh Billings, the humorist. He said, "It ain't what a man knows what hurts him, it's what he knows what ain't true." And many things we know about ourselves ain't true at all. What we do is we develop scotomas, or blind spots. Is once we've decided to believe a certain thing, we do not see anything that contradicts it. We may be doing wonderful things or wonderful work or being very successful. We don't even see that if we decided to believe that we will never make much more than we're making. Sometimes your parents will tell you, you've got to be worried about money, you've got to be careful about money all your life, and you'll never make very much, so you've got to hold on to every penny. And so people just hunker down, and they're more concerned about security than anything else. And so we develop these beliefs, these blind spots. And sometimes you need somebody to come along and open it up. And so you can see this vast world of possibilities that you have. And when this happens, people change completely. So your biggest obstacle is usually self-limiting beliefs. Your biggest obstacle is usually self-limiting beliefs. So what are your self-limiting beliefs? What are the most common ones? Well, the most common ones are internally, I'm not smart enough, I'm not as smart as other people, or I'm not talented enough, or I'm not creative enough, or I'm not something enough. It's just the most amazing damn thing. I remember this great story. His name was Igor, and he came to my seminar in New York, and he came to my seminar in Palm Springs, and he was a Russian immigrant. And he said he'd arrived, this was 5 years before, he arrived 5 years before from Russia, when Russia was just opening up in the 90s, and he had everything he owned on the streets of New York in a box, a cardboard box with string on it. And he didn't know a word of English, and he had to stop people on the street. He kept stopping people and asking them, looking for someone who spoke Russian. And he finally found somebody, and he would ask them something in Russian. Доброе утро, доброе утро, доброе утro. Good morning, because somebody responded back, доброе утро. And he said, "Where can I find Russians? I don't speak any English." He said, "Well, go to Little Russia. It's a little part of New York. How do you get there?" He showed him how to get there on the subway. So he gets there on the subway, and this big, long elevators. Everybody ever been to New York, coming up from the subway, the long, long elevator. He comes up, and the first thing he sees in Little Russia is a pizza place, which has Russian, it's a Domino's pizza with a Russian name. He goes in, he speaks to the owner in Russian. He said, "I need a job." And he said, "I need somebody to deliver pizza." So his first job was delivering pizza in Russian, in Little Russia, to other Russians. And that was his first job. And he did that, and the first thing he decided to do was learn English. He looked around, he said, "Why are so many Russians successful in America?" And there's an enormously successful Russian immigrant community in New York. And he found the first thing they did is they spoke English. So he just put his head down, he began to learn English. Pretty soon he could learn English. He could deliver pizzas to both Russians and non-Russians. And after a year, his English was good enough, so he applied for a job selling printing for a printing company. And he kept studying English, and at that time, he stumbled across my audio programs. My audio programs are used by Princeton University to teach English as a foreign language in 17 languages because they're very clear, they're grammatically correct, they're unaccented, and people who want to learn English also want to be more successful, so they get a twofer. They get success ideas, plus they learn English. Well, he started to listen to my programs, and his English got better and better. He worked for 2 years selling printing, and he could become so knowledgeable about the business, and had so many contacts, that he decided to start his own printing brokering business. This is year 4. When he came to my seminar, it was the end of year 5. That year, he had made more than $200,000 in commissions himself in his own business brokering printing. He said he was on track to make $300,000, $400,000. He'd be at $500,000 within 8 years of arriving off the boat with no English skills. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that we have obstacles that we create in our own minds, but imagine an immigrant with no skills, no friends, no contacts, starting off, and within 5 or 8 years making several $100,000 a year, because he had this unshakable belief that it was possible. He absolutely believed it was possible. And to him, no matter what happened, everything that happened to him was just a learning experience, because he could not even imagine not being successful. When you reach the point where you cannot even imagine not achieving great goals, your whole life changes for you. So the next meta law is the law of expectations. Now, this is a great law. There's libraries full of books. There are psychologists who worked for years on this. Dr. Robert Rosenthal of Harvard worked on this for years, and he found that your expectations, especially about your outcomes, become your own self-fulfilling prophecies. What does that mean? Is if you expect something to happen, it usually happens. It becomes your own prophecy. Because if you expect it to happen, you'll act consistent with it happening. You will treat other people the way it's going to happen. W. Clement Stone tells the story of this young man. He was running a large insurance agency. This young man was sent to him by one of his business associates, just came out of college, was starting off in